In May 2011, a woman called the police in panic.
爱民路，不是那是一北几号？出事了，一个家庭人都出事了，一家人在家里，哎呀，好像是一家人都死完了。
In May 2011, a family of 4 were killed at home in a condo building in Hezhou City, Guangxi Province. The male deceased, Zhou Zixiong, was the host of this family, 44 years old. He was the director of the tax bureau of Hezhou City. The female deceased, Ling Xiaoyun, was the wife. She was a businesswoman. The other female victim, Zhou Zixiong, was their daughter, 16 years old, who was a high school student at the time. There was also a male victim named Zhou Zixiong, the son of the couple, a 15-year-old student. This is a photo of this family. Such a happy family was brutally killed. This family lived in a condo on the 4th floor of the 7-story residential building. The condo had a large living room and 3 bedrooms. The couple died in the master bedroom, while their son and daughter died in the other 2 bedrooms. The crime scene was very brutal. The 4 victims' injuries were mainly concentrated on their heads, which were caused by blunt force trauma from more than 2 tools. Therefore, the police analyzed that it was unlikely for one person to use 2 tools simultaneously to commit the crime, so the murderers should be more than 2 people. After investigation, the police found that the killers were not for money. Because there were no signs of flipping with the items in the condo, and there was a large amount of cash left in the drawer, as well as jewelry and other valuables in the cabinets, the police ruled out a robbery or theft as the motive for the murder. Moreover, the killer even cleaned up the scene after the crime. Generally, people would leave immediately after committing a crime, but the killer actually carefully cleaned up the scene. The killers clearly knew the structure of the condo and carried out the murder step by step. They first killed the male and female adults who had resistance ability, and then went one by one to kill the children who had weak resistance ability. All these behaviors made the police conclude that it was likely to be an acquaintance crime. So the police launched an investigation into the social relationships of the victims. The deceased Zhou Zixiong was the director of the local tax bureau. He was relatively outstanding in his work performance and had a good relationship with his colleagues. After learning of Zhou Zixiong's murder, his colleagues felt very sad. Zhou Zixiong's wife, Ling Xiaoyun, did a successful business involving cement sales and real estate development. Therefore, the social relationships of the couple were complex. The social relationships of their children were much simpler. Zhou Zixiong was 16 years old and just started her first year of high school. She was adorable, and her younger brother was still in middle school. Neither of them had any conflicts with their classmates, so it was unlikely that this murder was caused by the 2 children. The autopsy by the forensic doctor determined that the time of death of the 4 victims was between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. on May 2nd. All 4 people were killed suddenly in their sleep, without any sign of resistance. Next, the police inquired this family's housekeeper about the situation. She was the person who called the police. According to the housekeeper, Zhou Zixiong's mother and her lived in the condo upstairs above Zhou Zixiong's family. On May 2nd, Zhou Zixiong family needed to attend a wedding. Zhou's mother and the housekeeper had planned to go to the wedding with the Zhou family together, but no one answered the door when they knocked. They thought that the family had not yet got up and left to go to the wedding themselves. But by 1:30 in the afternoon, Zhou Zixiong and his family still hadn't showed up at the wedding, so his mother and the housekeeper rushed home only to find that they all had been killed. After further investigation of the scene, the police found that there were no traces of climbing inside or outside the entire building where the crime scene was located, and there were no signs of prying on the door of the deceased's home. So in order to enter the crime scene, they must have the key to the victim's home. The building where Zhou Zixiong lived is special. Let's take a look at the situation of this building. This photo is of the 7-story residential building where Zhou Zixiong's family lived. The entire building belonged to the Zhou family. The first floor was rented out to shops, while the 2nd, 3rd, 6th, and 7th floors were empty. The fourth floor was occupied by Zhou Zixiong's family, while the fifth floor was occupied by Zhou Zixiong's mother and housekeeper. To enter Zhou Zixiong's home, the murderers must first enter the building's main entrance and then enter Zhou Zixiong's home on the fourth floor to commit the crime. Therefore, the killers should have the whole set of keys to Zhou Zixiong's building, otherwise it would be impossible to enter the scene. There were 5 sets of keys in the Zhou Zixiong family, which were kept by Zhou Zixiong, Ling Xiaoyun, Zhou Zixiong's mother, Zhou Zixiong's daughter, and a spare set of keys at home. Since all 5 sets of keys were not lost, the keys used by the killer must be made separately. The police conducted an investigation throughout Hezhou city to see if anyone had recently made such keys, but found nothing. At the same time, the police began to investigate the relatives who were most likely to have access to the Zhou family's keys. The relatives of the host, Zhou Zixiong, were his brother and mother. On May 2nd, his brother's daughter got married, and his brother was busy with the wedding, so he didn't have time to commit the crime. Zhou Zixiong's mother was the one who found the body. She suffered a heart attack on the day of the incident and was hospitalized, refusing to see anyone. The hostess Ling Xiaoyun had more relatives on her side. She was the 3rd child in her family, with 1 older sister who died years ago, 1 older brother, 1 younger brother, and 1 younger sister. They 3 lived together with their mother in this house. The younger brother said that they siblings had a good relationship, especially their baby sister Ling Xiaojuan was closest to Ling Xiaoyun. Moreover, their younger sister Ling Xiaojuan once lent all her savings to Ling Xiaoyun to start her business. The sister Ling Xiaojuan also provided a clue to the police. She said that her sister had been married before, and it was because of her affair with Zhou Zixiong that she ended her first marriage and married Zhou Zixiong. But after getting married, they didn't get along well, and they both had affairs with other people. During the investigation of the housekeeper, the police also confirmed that the deceased couple did have problems and often argued and not spoke to each other. If there were lovers, they might have access to the keys. So the police immediately investigated the clues of the couple's lovers, but found no suspicious person, and the police gradually gave up the possibility of killing for affairs. At this time, police made a new discovery at the crime scene. The murder scene was on the 4th floor, but the police found a footprint wearing socks on the uninhabited 6th floor. The length of the footprint was 10 inches, and the police speculated that it was left by a male between 5 feet 3 and 5 feet 6 tall. So the police would pay more attention to the males within this height range who were related to the deceased. In addition, during the on-site investigation, the police found the account books of the deceased Ling Xiaoyun. She wrote down every detail of both the business accounts and her family life account, even if a bag of milk or 1 pound meat. Therefore, her economic relationships were also clearly reflected in the accounting books. The police suspected that there might be a murder caused by debt disputes, so they investigated more than 10 people who had economic conflicts and debt relationships with the couple. No suspicious person was found among the Ling Xiaoyun's business partners, but there was a person in her relatives who had financial conflicts with Ling Xiaoyun, and this person was her brother-in-law Li Ling, who was the husband of her sister Ling Xiaojuan. The police learned that Li Ling used to work in a transport company, but later quit the job and went to work on the construction site of the deceased Ling Xiaoyun. It was originally agreed that Ling Xiaoyun would pay him 2,000 yuan a month with meals and accommodation included. However, in the end, he was only paid 1,500 yuan per month, and she was often in arrears of pay. Just the night before the crime, Li Ling's wife, Ling Xiaojuan, had called her sister to ask for his salary, which made Li Ling's suspicion of the crime rise. But Li Ling is 5 feet 7 tall, which is higher than the height of the suspect inferred by the police, and his footprints were different from the traces left at the scene, so he was temporarily ruled out of suspicion. At this time, it had been a week since the crime, but no clues were found to solve the case. Residents near Zhou Zixiong's home were afraid of going out, and some even moved away. On the 8th day, the police found a new clue after repeatedly studying the scene. When initially investigating the scene, the police had already determined that the killer had wiped the scene with a rag after committing the crime. After further investigation, it was discovered that there was a half shoe print next to the rag wiping mark. The police immediately extracted the half of the shoe print and found that it was a pair of women's slippers. The police found a shoe with a similar sole and brought it back for Zhou's mother and housekeeper to identify. The housekeeper said that the shoes were similar to the ones she left at the door of the 4th floor, but the shoes were now missing. The police believed that the missing shoes were taken away by the killer. The missing shoes were women's slippers in size 37. The police speculated that a female with a height of less than 5 feet 4 might have participated in the crime. In this way, the police basically portrayed the images of the two suspects who appeared at the scene. One was a female with a height of less than 5 feet 4, and the other was a male with a height of between 5 feet 3 and 5 feet 6. The two were familiar with Zhou Zixiong's family, had access to the keys, and had a significant conflict with the Zhou's family. It was the 10th day after the crime, and the policeman who had been investigating the key made a new discovery. 5 months ago, the mother of the deceased Ling Xiaoyun stayed at Zhou's home for a period of time. When she lived there, she had a set of keys of Zhou's family. Later, when she moved out back to her home, she asked her youngest daughter, Ling Xiaojuan, to return the keys to Zhou's family. This indicated that Ling Xiaojuan had the opportunity to duplicate the keys. Ling Xiaojuan is 5 feet 3 tall, and her shoe size is 37, which fit the characteristics of the female suspect. But could the younger sister brutally kill her sister's whole family? The police contacted with Ling Xiaojuan 4 times after the crime, but found no suspicions. Ling Xiaojuan's husband said that every night after the crime, Ling Xiaojuan, who didn't know how to search the internet, asked him to check the progress of the case online. But this is also a normal reaction of the victims' families. The police continued to investigate Ling Xiaojuan and found that on the night of the crime, she frequently contacted with a phone number, even at 3, 4, and 5 in the morning, and contacted again at 8 in the morning. The police found that the owner of this phone number that Ling Xiaojuan was talking to was Liu Shengming. Who was this Liu Shengming? It turned out that Ling Xiaojuan and Ling Xiaoyun's late older sister had a son named Su Kezhang and a daughter named Su Ji. They are Ling Xiaojuan and Ling Xiaoyun's nephew and niece. This Liu Shengming was exactly the boyfriend of their niece, Su Ji. The frequent phone calls between the aunt and her niece's boyfriend were suspicious. The height and weight of Liu Shengming were very consistent with the morphological characteristics of a footprint found by the police on the 6th floor. What made the police feel more suspicious was that he and his girlfriend Su Jie left Hezhou for Dongguan-City on the night of the crime. So the police rushed to Dongguan-City and found Su Ji and her boyfriend Liu Shengming. Not long after the police talked to Su Ji, she said that it was her aunt Ling Xiaojuan who did it.
这件事本来就很荒唐，很荒唐。我说这件事情就像是演故事一样，和电视剧没什么区别。
多少个人证？
我姨，还有
谁？说吧，说清楚来，说干净了。你姨还有谁？啊？
还有一个是呢。
After Su Ji confessed, the police immediately arrested Ling Xiaojuan and Liu Shengming. Later, Ling Xiaojuan confessed that Su Ji's brother Su Keqiang also participated in the crime. But why did they kill their own relatives so cruelly, even the kids? In the interview, Ling Xiaojuan told the reporter about the enmity between her and her sister, Ling Xiaoyun. She was 10 years younger than her sister. Both of them were smart and beautiful. Therefore, all the neighborhoods knew that Lin's family had 2 beautiful girls. Both sisters had similar experiences and had been divorced once. Ling Xiaoyun married Zhou Zixiong, the director of the tax bureau, after her divorce. while Ling Xiaojuan was still in the honeymoon period of her first marriage, and she sounded proud when talking about that time.
连我姐夫都让我3分，然后我姐夫还向他借钱，让我在家里面就是像女皇似的绷着。
But she didn't live like a queen for long because she divorced her ex-husband for various reasons. Later, she met Li Ling and married him. In 2000, her sister didn't have seed money to start her business, so Ling Xiaojuan lent her all the money to do the business. Then her sister was getting richer, buying a new house and fancy cars. Ling Xiaojuan believed that her sister made a fortune with her money, but in the end, she did not even get a share of the profits.
他做生意是他想跟你借钱，还是你主动借给他的？
凭什么要借给你啊？我借我的母鸡，准备下大的给你啊！我肯定要点股份的呀。
In order to take care of her babies, Ling Xiaojuan quit her job while her husband worked for her sister. What's more, her sister didn't pay the salary on time, which made her very angry. What made her feel even more unfair was that her sister was so rich, but she didn't help any family and even wasn't generous to their mother. So they quarreled a lot. Gradually, Ling Xiaojuan's resentment deepened, so she talked to her niece, Su Jie, who had always been very close to her, and her nephew, Su Keqiang, who had intellectual disability, about how to kill her sister Ling Xiaoyun and her family. Su Jie said that 1 year before the crime, Ling Xiaojuan had already been planning the murder and repeatedly requested Su Jie and Su Keqiang to cooperate with her. She finally asked Su Jie's boyfriend Liu Shengming to join them, promising to give him 300,000 yuan as a reward. Ling Xiaojuan discussed with them several times and was waiting for the opportunity. On the evening of May 1st, 2011, Ling Xiaojuan wanted to buy milk for her kids, but she didn't have any money. She called her sister to ask for her husband's salary, but got refused.
信乜嘅牛奶按太哦？我今年我学到跟他了，我也按好。他的口气就是这样，所以让我真的有时候是没办法忍受他，真的。
Ling Xiaojuan said that she was enraged and decided to carry out the plan that night. So in the early morning of May 2nd, she took the previously prepared keys, 3 hammers and a knife, and called on her nephews Su Keqiang and Liu Shengming. At 1 a.m., Ling Xiaojuan opened the door and entered Zhou's condo, asking Su Keqiang and Liu Shengming to kill Zhou's whole family. Later, they also came to the 5th floor trying to kill Zhou Zixiong's mother, because if Zhou Zixiong's mother died, then most of the Zhou family's money would be inherited by Ling Xiaojuan's mother. Fortunately, they couldn't open the door on the 5th floor, and Zhou's mother and housekeeper had a narrow escape. But Liu Shengming also wanted to check if there were any other people on the 6th floor, and he left traces in the empty room on the 6th floor. Before leaving, Ling Xiaojuan wiped the crime scene on the 4th floor with a rag. At that time, she was wearing the housekeeper's slippers, which left shoe prints. Afterwards, they fled the scene with the murder weapons and slippers. Later, they threw the murder tools into a river. The police found the tools and the keys, which were the solid evidence, from the river. Su Jie was identified as a co-conspirator due to her involvement in planning the crime, but she was underage at that time and was handled separately. Ling Xiaojuan and Liu Shengming were sentenced to death for intentional homicide. Su Keqiang, although with intellectual disability, had the ability to recognize his actions during the crime, so he also took legal responsibility and was sentenced to death too.